So these schools, what are they doing essentially? Keeping you for prolonged periods of time in confined spaces. We didn't have exams until the 8th standard. We didn't have. From 8th to 9th, we finished 8th and went into 9th. There was no exams. Initially, you were physically enslaved. Now your mind is enslaved. I didn't need to learn this from moral science, because you know what moral science taught me? Moral science taught me that when you are walking on the road, walk on the footpath. For 5 years, from nursery, LKG, UKG, 1 and 2, I didn't know what a footpath was because there was no footpath here. When you bring the child here, look at this place. Look at the beautiful area here. Why is there nobody here? Everybody's gone to schools. There is a school right down this road. I don't want to name it because it will be problematic later. They live in such a beautiful place. So many kids come to me for therapy from that school. They are confined indoors from 7:30 to 3:30 every day. They have 1 or 2 game periods a week. So today's education system is far behind. They have no idea what they are doing. They may say they do, but they don't. So all the values that you would have had from your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, the generations of wisdom that would have come to you and that would have been passed on to your child will not be passed on anymore. Never. It's not possible. Why do you think the children do all kinds of things today? They don't want to follow their dharma. They don't want to do anything. Why? Because the generations of information, the wisdom that has come is not passed on to the child, because you leave the child with a nanny. So the education system today does not allow for the cognitive development, for the overall development of the child. It only allows for the overall enslavement of the individual. I'm ready for the exam. I'm not ready for life. I'm ready for the exam. Education. What is the motive behind education? That's again, always, you need to find the motive and then you need to find the path. Okay. Why do we educate ourselves? Why do we educate our children? Let me tell you what is happening right now in brief, in a few sentences. And then you ask yourself, is this appropriate for our society? Is this appropriate for any given community for that matter? Or is it not? Or is there something wrong? Okay. So let's take our lives for instance. Your life is probably similar to mine only in that way. Nursery, we grew up, we were born, then 2.5 years, 3 years into our birth, after our birth, we went into schools. पहिला play school थियो, म चाहिँ play school गइनँ. I never went to play school. I don't think there was a concept that time. But then I was so naughty that they put me in school when I was 2.5 years old. Okay, so 2.5 years in, I was in nursery. Then LKG, UKG. Every year you have exams, and then I became first in nursery. Okay, and then why first? But anyway, then you essentially study through your school. You have to get promoted. So apparently, if you don't pass an exam, if you are not able to memorize a certain chunk of information, you are not worthy to study the next grade. Okay, that is the basis of our education. Our education consistently tests our ability to memorize, number one. Our ability to sit in one place for prolonged periods of time, doing something absolutely unnecessary. Okay. Then you go to your 10th, and then you are tested on your memories. Not on what you know and what you understand, but what you can reproduce. What you can reproduce is what you are tested. You can memorize the hell out of a subject, 2 days in, go write, get 95%, but know nothing about it. Okay? That is a grand possibility, and that is happening with most people anyway. Then you have 12th. After 12th, see, you are put into a good, lower kindergarten, upper kindergarten, primary school, so you can do well in your secondary and your tertiary schools, which is high school or whatever. After that, you get into a good college. Why? So that you can get into a good university, good education. Why? So you can get a good job. If you get a good job, you work from 9 to 5. For how long? For 30, 40 years until you're 60, 62, 65, whatever, 70, whenever your retirement age is. Then you enjoy the pension. If you have a good pension, if you don't have a pension, you suffer through your old age. Okay? And then you are born, your children are born, of course, at some point, and then you send them to these very same schools. So these schools, what are they doing essentially? Keeping you for prolonged periods of time in confined spaces so that you can be slaves in the future in these multinational corporates, and I'm not very against them or anything, I'm just giving you an idea. They have large offices where you have to sit for prolonged periods of time in confined spaces. Okay, and then they incentivize this by giving you these perks and drinks and whatever every now and then. But what is it? It is just, initially you were physically enslaved, now your mind is enslaved. How? Through your education system. No part of the education system have you been educated or have you been allowed to think independently. Have you noticed? We are not allowed to just sit and just be. We constantly have to learn how to think. In mathematics, they do not give us a problem and allow us to figure the answer. Allow us to see how many methodologies we can utilize to come to a conclusion. It may not be right. It doesn't matter if it's right. What matters is how are you thinking. That's not what we are taught. We are taught in division, you put these two brackets on either end, put the number you are going to divide and what you are going to divide by on the outside, and exactly this way if you do, you will get the answer. Okay. When you do addition, you write the number on top, you write the number at the bottom, add the single digits. Carry over. Have we ever given space to a child to just sit down and say, this is what we refer to as the Pythagoras theorem. Try and see how you can derive this theorem. I'm telling you, 99.9% of schools in India do not allow the child to think and try and figure out the Pythagoras theorem. Like, figure it from the formula, of course, not to figure it by themselves. We did in our school when I was in the 8th standard. Teacher was Ramachandran sir, very, very nice man. And I did very well with him also. Because he used to give time to each student separately. He used to come and he used to look, Didi, like that he would say, he'll give, very soft spoken. And he said, see, this is the Pythagoras theorem. Try and derive this formula from whatever. I don't remember any of us really deriving it. Maybe somebody had read it and done it or something. I don't remember that. But do you know what I remember? I remember trying. Just being and trying. Trying different ways in which it could work. There was no pressure for exams. We didn't know, oh, is this going to come for the exam? How am I going to memorize it? Never, never. We didn't have exams until the 8th standard. We didn't have. From 8th to 9th, we finished 8th and went into 9th. There was no exams. That is education. You educate. You don't have to educate the mind of the child. You have to allow the mind of the child to be educated by themselves. When you bring the child here, look at this place. Look at the beautiful area here. Why is there nobody here? Everybody's gone to schools. There is a school right down this road. I don't want to name it because it will be problematic later. They live in such a beautiful place. Their school is in such a beautiful place. But so many kids come to me for therapy from that school. They are confined indoors from 7:30 to 3:30 every day. They have 1 or 2 games periods a week. Okay. You studied in the same school. You see. Yes, there are schools which give space to children, and you did go to a nice place also. You did horse riding and stuff. That develops cognitive function of the child. It allows the child to grow. When we had EVS, when we had science subjects, do you know how we studied? We went for a walk. We looked at the plants, variegated leaves, look at the roots, tap roots, fibrous roots, plucked some weeds out, looked at the shrubs, all of these things we did. There was a percolation tank. We went to the percolation tank 1 week. We saw after the rain it was full. Then we went the next week, we saw the water had come down. What happened to the water? It evaporated and it percolated. I don't need to study that in textbooks. I need to go and enjoy it. Then we played there. We used to have all kinds of games. We played there. Then we came back in a class, not a games period. We didn't even have games period like that. This is how you develop a child's cognitive ability. So today's education system is far behind. They have no idea what they are doing. They may say they do, but they don't. They don't know what needs to be done to the child. Or rather, what should not be done to the child is something that they don't know at all. They're trying to create new textbooks and this and that, but you have not given the child space to grow. You are telling the child that he needs to go to school from 3 years old. And of course, why not? Because now the father and the mother has to work. You see, because there is equality. Everybody has to work. Okay? Because it's equal. You cannot, apparently saying that to allow for a good homely environment for the child is backward. And we must say that everybody should work in the household. So who's the child going to be with? A nanny. Or somebody is going to come and take care. So all the values that you would have had from your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, the generations of wisdom that would have come to you and that would have been passed on to your child will not be passed on anymore. Never. It's not possible. Why do you think the children do all kinds of things today? They don't want to follow their dharma. They don't want to do anything. Why? Because the generations of information, the wisdom that has come is not passed on to the child, because you leave the child with a nanny. Because you have to go to work, because we are equals. See? But at what cost? The child does not have somebody to play with. Okay? Child does not have their parents because they're both stressed. And the stress that the parent brings home, the child also imbibes. He also realizes that, oh, life is stressful. Oh, in the future, I will be like my father. He is stressed now, I will also be stressed. Oh, my mother is also going to work. She is also stressed. In the future, I will also be stressed. This is life. Instead, yes, okay, somebody has to work. No problem. Yes, both of you want to work. Okay. Though that is not the question I'm trying to bring here right now. I'm trying to say, what is our priority for a society? For a society to be in a good space, for a good future. Don't you need children to have a good future? But you don't. Why? Because the child does not have the appropriate samskara. Again, okay, mother and father. So like my mother, she had to work when she was young because we were very, very poor. Okay, we didn't have anything. So my father had to work and my mother had to work just to ensure that we are fed. I was left with my grandparents. So I did get the samskara from my grandparents. But now, the parent must live differently from the child. Once you marry, send them away. We are independent. So you don't want to live with the grandparents anymore. The wife comes home, if you get married, the other way around, they have to live in a third home. The child does not have the grandparents to play with, to grow with. They don't have that. So the education system today does not allow for the cognitive development, for the overall development of the child. It only allows for the overall enslavement of the individual, complete enslavement. And barely a few have independent minds. They think independently, in spite of what they are taught. And when they are taught in this way, and those are the ones who become leaders in the future. Trust me on this. Okay? Yes, even if you leave children independently, they may not all become great leaders. Yes, it's okay. But they'll be leaders of their own life. They will never be harmful to society. Why? Because they understand humanity. You have moral science in your class. That is the most ridiculous subject that one can have in school. Moral science. You don't need to learn morality from a class. You need to learn morality from living. You need to have parents. You need to have brothers and sisters and people you play with. You will learn morality when you engage in life, engage in community. When you go to a communal area where you meet different people and then you behave and then your mother tells you, no, this is not the way to behave. When I walk up the street, when I used to walk up the street, my mother would tell me, "Sabale namaskar garnu. त्यो हाम्रो संस्कार हो." It stayed with me. I didn't need to learn this from moral science, because you know what moral science taught me? Moral science taught me that when you are walking on the road, walk on the footpath. For 5 years, from nursery, LKG, UKG, 1 and 2, I didn't know what a footpath was because there was no footpath here. Imagine my life, that a child who is learning moral science is taught that there is a footpath. But I don't know what a footpath is. So I thought it was a food path, number one. Then I thought the grass, so wherever there is grass, there is footpath. When I actually went to like places like Delhi and Kolkata and so on, then I saw there is a street, and apparently this is called a footpath. Because हाम्रोमा त फुटपाथ थिएन त. अब गाउँ जान्थ्यौँ, गाउँमा त एउटा सानो बाटो छ. Is that a footpath? Okay, maybe that is a footpath. So in my mind is that. And then I would ask myself, why are these people teaching me to walk on the footpath? Where else will I walk? Where else will I walk? So there is a complete lag between what an education is and what we are being taught. Okay. So everything, 99% of what the current educational policies are doing, I don't know about the government, I don't care about it. What I do care about is what is it what transformational attributes are being presented to the child. And that is nothing but a few schools, but a few places. I have a very nice dear friend and his children, they're homeschooled now. They travel and then the children travel with them. They don't go to school anymore. You know? And they learn so much. They know so much. That is essentially what the child needs to learn. That is the problem with the education today. Can you repeat the question? I'll just see if I've left anything behind.
Impacts the overall development.
Yes. I think I've answered most of this question. The last thing is about academic stress. Okay. The academic stress is an outcome of lack of directionality in life. You are stressed academically because you have to write exams. So you study for exams. You don't study to learn. You don't read to know. हामी कहिले पनि पुस्तक पढ्दाखेरि म जान्दछु, म यो सिकेँ, I learnt. We never say that. We say, I am memorized. I am ready for the exam. I am not ready for life. I am ready for the exam. So after the exam, you don't need that information because that information was earmarked for the exam and exam alone. It was not earmarked for anything else. So you will not remember it. You see. But if we want to create a good educational future for our child, for our children, the children must realize that they need to learn just to learn, just to know. Aham janami, I know. That's it. And that information, when you know, will remain with you for a long time. And somewhere in the future it will come in use, come in handy. Like a lot of things that are garbage, I know them. But it helps me with patience because I relate to different people now. You know? Because I can talk about anything under the sun because somewhere or the other I would have heard about it, I would have thought about it, I would have listened to it, something or the other. You know? Information that is just taken to learn, it does not give you stress. That is how I prevented stress during my 10th and 12th because I did have to write boards then. What I would just do is, जान्नका लागि त पढ्दैछु. I'm just learning for the sake of learning. So it doesn't matter if I finish 10 chapters or 20 chapters. If I finish 5 chapters, but I know the 5 chapters, I am in a good place. I did well, I did okay. But I remember everything I studied. I can still teach people physics, 11th, 12th physics. Not very well. I have to go back because I did not take mathematics in my 11th and 12th. So that may be an issue a little bit. But I do understand the concepts much better than I would have otherwise had I just this thing. I may have been for instance, 10th standard. Until 10th standard, whatever I have studied, more or less I remember. Why? Because when I used to study, I used to play TT, I used to do a lot of things, 2-3 hours even in the board time, no more than 2 or 3 hours. I couldn't study, just to sit and just to learn. And it was an enjoyable time, you know. And I feel that in today's day, if a child must find a way to move away from stress, the child must just remember that we are here to learn. I'm learning. It doesn't matter how much I do. The parents are putting too much pressure. I just want to learn. And that is it. Does that answer your question?